Let's explore a specific trace in the tracing UI in Coralogix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a nice complicated one so we can see many different interactions happening. The easiest way to find your most complex traces, first switch from spans to traces view as we did in a previous video. And then we can already see it's ordered by descending order in spans there. They remembered that configuration from last time, which is really cool. So I can see this one has 60 spans. That's very, very busy. Just click on it. The modal slides in from the right hand side, and we can see a lot of stuff is going on here. So you can see that the trace originated from the HTTP post load generator, and then it moved down into a series of different queries that have happened that have all been part of the same transaction. Each one of these lines is a span, except where you see something like this. See this +9 indicates there are multiple queries, in this case 10 queries that were issued as part of this particular trace. So that means there's 10 spans for this line, and it helpfully shows you the actual maximum value, so you can see an important summary of what was actually going on there. This is just one view that's available to you. You can see some summary data up here about the services that were involved, the depth, as in the number of recursions that occurred as part of this trace, the total number of spans, number of events, the date and time, and the overall time as well. You can see these services here. This is a really nice breakdown. So you see the load generator took 48% of the execution time, front end 45%. Everything else is kind of peripheral. If you don't like this view, there are a few other options as well. You have the flame view. It gives you a really nice breakdown of how each different service actually contributed to the different to the overall thing. So this is the root span here, and then we can see it's broken down into these two spans, and it's broken down by the cart endpoint, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. So it allows you to see what contributed most heavily here. So you can see that even though cart's very long, it's actually broken up by lots and lots of these different spans here. And actually this listing of the recommendation service is quite long. And you can see actually how it breaks down really nicely. So that's really powerful for seeing the bottlenecks. Same thing with the Gantt view as well, actually. The Gantt view is really nice for seeing the overall timeline of events that occurred. So generally speaking, as a piece of advice here, if you're looking for which service relies on which other service, use the dependencies view. It's just immediately clear what depends on what here. If you're looking for bottlenecks, the flame view and the Gantt view are really, really useful. Now, if I select one of these spans, I'll get metadata about that particular sort of exchange that happened. So for example, I can see all the different tags. I can see the actual SDK language. This is a Golang application. I can see the SDK's open telemetry. I can see event IDs and much, much more. The actual HTTP data and everything else. If I pick, this is actually specific though, so if I pick, for example, this Redis endpoint here, it automatically flags that this is a database transaction, and so the span has the actual DB statement associated with it. This is a Redis HGET query. Super, super powerful. It just means that you're not searching for information constantly. And likewise, it will have appropriate sort of endpoint changes as well. So this query was issued by a .NET application, for example. Now, if we pick one of the applications that are hosted, for example, a recommendation service here, we can click on related data. Now, related data will show you some really, really powerful information. One is the related logs. These are the logs that were written at the time the span was created. So you can just correlate this application's logging activity. Logs give context. So when you can see that a span is running longer than it should do, you can always just dive into the logs. Next, you have the events themselves. This is actually the events that occurred to break up the span. Then you have the pod metrics. So if you're running on Kubernetes, what you can do is actually view the CPU, memory, the spans, the overall spans actions, everything about that system. So this isn't just a traces view. We've now seen logs, metrics, and traces. And these metrics will give you, for example, if a span is taking way too long, you don't know why, dive into here and you can see maybe the CPU is spiked really high. Same thing with the memory. Maybe the memory spiked really high or the network is spiked really high. And that gives you some idea that perhaps there is a problem there and that this is the root cause of the problem. Likewise, if there's nothing specific about the pod, you can jump to the host. And this is actually the server on which the pod was running. So if you're using Kubernetes, this is a really nice way of visualizing what's actually going on in your system in a very complete way. The final thing I want to talk about is just the overall breakdown of the view. So we can see here, for example, that we have multiple different spans. If you click on this, on these like stacked spans here, you can go and pick the one that you're most interested in. So you can see here, this one's 7.81 milliseconds, nothing's faster than that. It's all ordered nicely. And you can actually break down that as if you were clicking on a normal span that wasn't stacked. So we've covered a bunch of different information here. We've covered the metadata that's available on the right-hand side, the different views that are available, dependencies, flame, and Gantt. We've talked about the ancillary data that we decorate this information with, like the metrics around CPU and networking and memory and etc. And also these summaries at the top. And don't underestimate the power of this particular service. This summary alone will tell you everything you need to know about the bottlenecks in your interactions. So definitely dive into the tracing UI view. It's really, really nice. And I would recommend my only piece of advice would be, if you're planning on implementing the dependencies view, try to fully instrument the entire journey, because there's nothing worse than having gaps and wondering where the sort of request went. So try to instrument the entire journey if you can. That way you get this really clean, really beautiful sort of overall view of what's happening in your system.